Good morning. It's good to be together again this morning. For whatever reason this morning I was freezing and I wore a thick black hooded sweatshirt that I got for my birthday, and I thought about preaching in it because I'm still a little bit cold, but for you, I decided to look a little bit more professional. So you're welcome. The last few Sundays we've been talking about questions of what does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to truly trust God? And this morning I want to talk about why are we faithful? Why are we faithful to God? Again, a question that I don't know if we ever really think about very often. Sometimes we kind of cruise through life and we do what we do, and that's what we do, and that's how we do it. And that's fine to have routines, but every now and again it's good to reflect and think, why do I do the things that I do? Why am I the way that I am? Why am I faithful to God? Sometimes I think we answer that question with, because I want to have good in my life and not have bad in my life, right? I want blessings, not curse. I want good experiences, not bad experiences. I want to have the good things happen and not the bad things happen. And so we think, well, if I'm faithful to God, then I'll be more on the left side of that screen and less on the right side of the screen. I'll have more of the good and less of the bad. Of course, you can see the image I found is a guy, he's in the bad, and he just wishes he could burst the bubble and get to the good side where it's sunny and warm, kind of like what people think San Diego is supposed to be like. That's what we want. That's why we pay the sunshine tax. So we can have warmth and comfort all year long, except for this year and half of last year. We want to have good experiences. We want the good life. That's what we want. And I found some passages of Scripture that kind of might help us along, or maybe they might not. They come to us from the book of Deuteronomy. Now, in the past, there was one sermon I did years ago where we went through every verse of Deuteronomy chapter 28. Every single verse. We're not doing that this morning. There's a lot there. The first 15 verses are the good life. It's all good. Sunshine every day. No need for a black hooded sweatshirt. And the last 3/4 of that same chapter is nothing but rainy, bad days. Deuteronomy 28, you will be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. The fruit of your womb will be blessed, and the crops of your land, and the young of your livestock, the calves of your herds, and the lambs of your flocks. Now, to us, none of this really means much. How many of you have a herd or a flock of anything? Raise your hand if you have a flock of something. So you're going to have to imagine what this might mean for a person living 3,000-4,000 years ago, because you have exactly 0 flocks. Now, where I grew up, people did have flocks, but we don't really have flocks here. So what's it referring to? It's referring to the things that give you safety and security in your life. For us, it might be your 401k, your Roth IRA, your savings account, any kind of retirement account you might have set up, your Social Security for the future. I know some of you are like, Social Security? It doesn't sound so secure anymore. It never has sounded secure. We have these things in our lives like, I know that as I progress through life, I will have safety and security. My needs will be met. I'll be taken care of. And so Deuteronomy 28 says, yeah, there is a time and there's a place, but it hasn't answered how yet. Actually, if you read it chronologically from verse 1, it will tell you at the very beginning, but we'll hit that at the end. Right now, we're still wondering, how do I get there? This is what I want. I want to be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. I want to be blessed no matter where I go or whatever decision I make in my life. I want to be blessed. I want it to go well. I want to feel safe. I want to feel secure if I take that job over here, or if I go to that college over there, or if I marry this person here, if we do this or that. I just want to know that no matter what happens in life, I'll be good. That sounds good, right? That's what we all want. That's what I want. All of us want that. And we want the calves of our herds and lambs of our flocks to multiply because we have so many of them. The Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of his bounty, to send rain on your land in season, and to bless all the work of your hands. Again, how many of you grow crops? So again, you have to imagine, what does that mean? Well, if you lived off the land and you got no rain, that means you got no crops. That means you've got no food. That means you're going to starve to death. You have no security. Well, I don't want that. I want it to rain so that those seeds that I planted will grow, so that my family will have food, so that the poor can come and glean from what I've planted. And for all of that to happen, I need some rain. It says, well, the Lord will do that for you. You will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. Financial independence as a nation. God will give that to you. When? Hold on, you'll find out. The Lord will make you the head and not the tail. Yes. That is what I'm talking about. You mean all I have to do is be faithful to God and all of that will happen for me? This sounds fantastic. Sign me up. Where's the dotted line? Where's the fine print? I will sign my name on that paper. Yes, please. But then we also have the bad life. See, now I have to, not only do I want the good life, what do I got to do to get the good life? I got to learn what not to do to not get the bad life. But what does the bad life look like? It's way worse than the good life. It's 75% more text to tell you how bad things will get. I have just put here the lowlights, just for you. You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. No matter what you decide to do, it will not work. Oh, I don't want that. Your basket and your kneading trough will be cursed. Or your refrigerator will stop working. You'll show up right after you got fired. You open your fridge and all the food is spoiled. The fruit of your womb will be cursed. Now your children will be cursed. The crops of your land and the calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks. Your 401k went away. You show up to work, there's been fraud, and you lost everything. Oh no. Oh no. The stock market crashed. Everything that you ever thought you could count on has gone away, even your Social Security. I still have my Medi-Cal and Medicare. No, you don't. It's all gone. There's been a government collapse. It's all gone away. You will be cursed when you come in and cursed when you go out. Oh, see? I like the first 15 verses better. The Lord will plague you with diseases until he has destroyed you from the land you are entering to possess. No. The Lord will strike you with wasting disease, with fever and inflammation, with scorching heat and drought, the blight and mildew, which will plague you until you perish. The Lord will afflict your knees and legs with painful boils that cannot be cured, spreading from the soles of your feet to the top of your head. That is exactly what happened to Job. Word for word. The description given to Job, which we'll hit in just a second. I know Luke preached on Job a couple weeks ago. We won't go through all that, just a mention. Because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege, you will eat the fruit of your womb. Ugh. If you were hungry, like, when was he going to stop talking so I can have lunch? You just lost your appetite. You're going to be surrounded by enemies. They're going to lay siege to your city. You'll be so hungry because there's no rain and no crops. You're going to resort to eating your own children. The flesh of the sons and the daughters the Lord God has given you. Now I really don't want the bad life. I thought the bad life was maybe having to miss a meal. Not have my children as a meal. That's worse. The Lord will send fearful plagues on you and your descendants, harsh and prolonged disasters and severe and lingering illnesses. He will bring you all the diseases of Egypt that you dreaded, and they will cling to you. The Lord will also bring on you every kind of sickness and disaster not recorded on in this book of the law until you are destroyed. So, in case I forgot anything, in case there's some lingering plague that I haven't mentioned specifically here, that will happen too. Use your imagination. All of it's going to happen to you. But why? Why is this all going to happen? To which our little boy cries out, "No! I don't want that. That's not what I signed up for. How do I sign up for the other thing and not this thing? How do I escape the dread that's coming for me?" To which Deuteronomy has a very simple answer. Regarding the blessings, all these blessings will come on you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. Now, normally what you would hear a preacher say is, so, and the sermon would end here, so obey the Lord your God, and your life's going to be A-okay. Huh? Everything's going to go great. Your children, they're going to be great. Everything is going to go exactly the way you figured it would because you obeyed the Lord your God. Which brings me back to my original question. Why are we faithful? Why do we come to church? Why do we do this? Why do we wake up every morning and think, how can I be a good Christian today? Why are we faithful to God? And some people, and it's preached quite a bit, some people say we're faithful to God so that we can have the good life. So that disease and plague and disaster, that never happens to you. You will be unharmed and untouched. But there's only one problem with that. It's that your life experience tells you that that's not quite true. Right? Now, I'm not belittling what Deuteronomy has to say because Deuteronomy, which I'm not going to get into now, has a way of talking that was familiar to the people of that time, and they would have understood what that looked like. To us, it looks like just a straight-up contract. Do this, yes. Do this, bad. Do this, good things. Do that, bad things. Or don't do this, bad things, right? There's some nuance that needs to happen. And our problem is Job, really. Now, those of you who know me are probably already rolling your eyes. Job, not Job again. Just a mention. I love Job. Some of my friends are like, you love Job? It's where God makes a bet with Satan over the life of Job and he loses everything? Yeah, I love Job. It's a great story. The problem with Job is all of those curses that I just read, they happened to him. His children, dead. Now, he didn't need his children, but they all died. All of his flocks died, taken over by enemies. All of his fields destroyed, taken over by enemies. His health deteriorated from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. He was covered with incurable boils. Again, word for word, what Deuteronomy says to people who are unfaithful. And the problem that Job has is Job is faithful. So how do you explain it? And the question that God poses to Satan is, have you considered my servant Job? And Satan says, Job's not fair. He's not a fair example because you've protected him so much with all of these blessings. Of course he's faithful to you. He would never betray you. You're giving him all these good things. See, some people think the book of Job is a book about what to do while you're suffering, but it's not really about that. It's about why do you serve the God you serve? And Satan says, You serve God because God blesses you. And if the blessings go away, you go away. And Job loses everything. At the end of the book, God says, Job didn't say a single thing about me that was wrong. And you see the three friends, and God says, unlike you three, Job spoke rightly about me. Oh, but his friends, you know the story. They tore him limb from limb, metaphorically. They spent 7 days in silence with him, and then they accused him of every horrible sin you could ever think of and more. Because the only way they understood the world was that if you do bad things happen to you because God is cursing you. And if you have good things, it's because you have been a good person. Everything was black and white. Everything made sense. And Job said, the problem is I'm not doing anything wrong. And that was an unacceptable explanation for them. Until the end. When God says, you better have Job pray for you guys, lest I curse you. You see, the problem the friends have is, I'm faithful to God. We're all doing what we do, right, guys? We're all doing what we do so that God blesses us. But what if he doesn't? Sounds like the sermon from last week. Well, if he doesn't, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sound a trumpet as I give. Because if God doesn't bless me, then at least you will. I'll make sure my left hand knows what my right hand is doing, just in case the God in secret is so secretive that he doesn't ever bless me. So I'll make sure that you do. Do we serve God? Are we faithful to God? Because we want God to give us everything that we want that's good, and we want to avoid everything that's bad. If being faithful doesn't save us from the curse, then why are we doing this? I think I shared this story once. A lady where I grew up started going to church, and they asked her, why? So why are you coming to church now? And just getting to know her. And she said, well, because I've got kids now, and I really want my kids to be good and have good things happen for my children. And I know if I don't go to church, well, then, God will never bless us. So I've got to come to church so God will bless us. She was convinced that by going to church, that would force the hand of God to bless her and her children. But those of us who have been around a while, we know that that's not always how things work. Sometimes we do the best we can as a parent, and things happen. Sometimes we live a good life and people we love get sick. Sometimes they die. Sometimes we get sick. Sometimes we get told, you've got something, and it isn't going to go away. You have heard that it was said. Now see, I've tricked you because I'm still on the narrow gate sermon. Gotcha. Jesus, right at the very beginning, right after he does the Beatitudes, he says, you've heard it was said. And he goes through something the Old Testament says, and he says, that's actually not what it means. But I'm convinced he says it right after the Beatitudes because the Beatitudes seem to say something different entirely than what we just read. Jesus says, looking at his disciples, he said, blessed are you who are poor. No, the poor, Jesus, you got it wrong. The poor part, that was in the curse part. Jesus, what do you mean? Blessed are the poor. No. Poor starts in verse 16 of Deuteronomy 28. If you don't obey, you're poor. If you don't obey, you have to borrow and you cannot lend. That happens when you've disobeyed. And Jesus says, no, blessed are you when you are poor. For yours is the kingdom of God. Now you can start to see why after he says these things, he says, you have heard it was said. Because he's already messed them up. Blessed are you who hunger now. No, God, Jesus, again, hungry? That's a curse. Jesus says, no, it's a blessing. God will take care of you. One day you'll be fed. But you're blessed right now, even though you don't have any food to eat. You know, when Jesus was preaching to the crowds, and it says he saw them and they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he says, let's feed them. Well, why don't they have any food? Jesus did not say, don't feed them, they're obviously cursed. No, he says, no, we're going to feed them. They're hungry. He tells his disciples, go get some food, and they're like, Jesus, you're crazy. You see how many people there are? You think 12 of us are going to be able to gather up enough food for all these people? Blessed are you who hunger now. Blessed are you who weep now. For you will laugh. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice, it's like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Now, what words? What does it mean to build your house on the rock? What does it mean to be faithful? What does it mean to walk through the narrow gate? What does any of this mean? It's all the same thing. To build your house on the rock is to live your life in the way of the narrow gate, where you trust God. You love people. You treat people the way that you want to be treated. Even people who don't treat you the way you want to be treated. You treat people the way that you want to be treated. Because that's what God does for you. That's what it means to build your house on the rock. It's not some doctrine that you mentally or intellectually ascend to. It's the way that you live your life every day. Then you'll be like a wise man. I was telling someone earlier today, I've stopped trying to be right. I'm just trying to be wise. It's like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down. The streams rose. The winds blew and beat against that house. Wait a minute, Jesus. I thought if I built my house on the rock, the storms would never come. That sounds like a curse. No, that's life. That's life. Jesus says, when you build your house on this rock, it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice, it's like a foolish man, right? I'm just trying to be wise and not a fool. I'm not going to get everything right. I can't possibly get everything right, but I'm trying to be wise. And I'm trying to live my life in a wise way and not like a fool. And to do that, it's to build my life on the words of Jesus. Specifically, the Sermon on the Mount. That's what it means to be a Christian. That's what it means to walk through the narrow gate. Jesus says, take these words, apply them, live by them, trust in a good God who is caring for you. He knows that bad things happen, and yet he is there. It's like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down. The same thing happens to everyone. You cannot judge a person by the things that are happening in their life. That's what Eliphaz did to Job. Oh, you're experiencing bad things? I know why. You must be living an awful, sinful life. I think I've shared the story of a former boss. He always said it jokingly. He would say, how are you doing? He said, I'm doing good. He's like, get the sin out of your life and you'll be doing even better. He'd always say something like that. And so one day, I think it was at a memorial service for a member, I walked up and he's like, hey, Rob, how you doing? I go, Fred, I'm doing good. I got the sin out of my life and I'm doing fantastic. The same thing happens to all of us. Whether you're faithful or pagan, sickness will strike you. You'll have health issues. Family problems will happen to you. Financial problems might happen to you. All these things happen to everybody. You don't build your life on the rock so that bad things don't happen. You build your life on the rock so that when they do happen, you can withstand it. The streams rose and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. My fear is when we preach a sermon like this, people go, so he's talking about my religion. I'm not. Unless religion to you means your way of life. He's talking about the final day of judgment. I don't think Jesus is talking about the final day of judgment. I think he's talking about your everyday life. So our pursuit for good and for bad, good things in life and avoid the bad things in life, I think it's a completely illegitimate pursuit. You have no control over what's going to happen to you in your life. And there's no amount of faithful acts that are going to save you from something bad happening in your life. Like, I don't like that, Rob. I don't like it either. But it's literally what Jesus just said. Storms happen in life. It's not a sign of whether you're faithful or unfaithful. They just happen. You want to be able to withstand the storm. Faith is filled with good and with bad. There's no guarantee that bringing your children to church every Sunday is going to make them faithful or unfaithful or give them a good life or have a bad. There's no guarantees in life. Last week I said control is an illusion. Guarantees are also an illusion. You ever had a car warranty that they won't honor because you forgot to bring it in once for a checkup? Oh, I'm so sorry. That guarantee that you thought you had, you don't have it. Oh, no. You owe us $4,000. Oh, even worse. Faith is filled with good things and with bad things. It just is. That's your life. Your life is filled with good and bad. One day you're celebrating because something wonderful happened. The next day you're crying with someone because something horrible happened. That's life. And Job will tell you no amount of good living can save you from that. It will happen. But when the broad way of hate has halted. Now remember the narrow gate. It's not a doctrine, it's a way of life. And Jesus says, love each other. Love your neighbor as yourself. And everybody's your neighbor. The system of hate and prejudice and discrimination, it's a dead way of life. And the hate that you hold on to it's not in the narrow way. Will hate cease at the end, at the final end, the end when God, hate will end then, but it should end in your life now. See, at the end, I'm not worried about my enemy slapping me or telling me to walk with him a mile. That is over. But Jesus says that should be over now for you. That thing you're hoping for at the end, that, it's going to be great, it's going to be wonderful. Yeah, that's great. Can you be great and wonderful now? Can you love your enemy? Can you forgive? Can you trust? Now. And when the broad way of fear has failed. Fear is a failure of a way to live. You know what? The youngest here is, Natalie's not here, so In 70 to 80 years, every single one of us will be dead. And that is going to happen no matter what you do or don't do. Oh, I can't do that. I'm so afraid. You're going to be dead in 70 years anyway. Hate to break it to you. Some of you a little sooner than that. So why are we so afraid? Why are we so afraid? That's not the narrow gate way of living. I mean, I understand it. That's not the narrow gate way of living. We're always afraid. And we're harboring hate in our hearts for people. We only love the people who are like us, who believe like us, who act like us, that talk like us, that dress like us. We only love them. And Jesus says, yeah, that's not narrow gate living. And so you know what we do? We make the narrow gate a list of doctrines that I can say yes or no to. I believe that, yes. I did that, yes. That check, 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 check. I'm in the narrow gate. Because that is a whole lot easier than waking up every single day and saying, today I'm not going to live in fear. Today I'm going to love every single person that I come across. Today. Because the system of hate and the systems of fear, storm comes, it all falls apart. Paul says it like this. He says, 3 things remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Every other system, every other way of life is doomed to fail. The narrow gate of love will remain. I'm not faithful to God because I want God to make my life perfect. I'm faithful to God because I want to help make your life better. Well, how are you going to do that? By loving you. By loving you. You know, in beauty pageants, they always ask these crazy questions. Name one world crisis, and how would you overcome it? And the beauty pageant participant has to think on her feet and come up with some answer. I'm like, oh, I wish they'd ask me that. Because I would say, world hunger, and there is no cure. Except maybe I can help someone next to me who's hungry. And maybe, just maybe, if we all did that, we wouldn't have people who are hungry. I'm faithful to God because the way that God gives us to live our life, this life of without fear and love, it is the only thing that will survive. It's the only thing that will last. And you may have already seen it around you, someone who had such hate and such anger in their life, and it all falls apart. They're not dead. But that whole system falls apart. You're both in the same storm, but you're there to help them. Storms come and storms go, but love remains. So I invite you to enter through the narrow gate and help me to live the life of the narrow gate. Let's help each other to do it. It's not easy. There is nothing I've said through this whole sermon or sermon series that's been easy for anybody. It's all very hard. So Jesus says, yeah, I know. Be perfect. Be whole, be complete as your heavenly Father is complete. And enter through the narrow gate. Amen? Amen.